Hey, so some of us we've only kind of briefly been acquainted. My name is Gabe. I have this wonderful, splendid, vague, and undefined role in our church that I really enjoy. Just this last week, Adam and I discussed how I don't have any kind of title, and I like it that way. Adam and I met at Bible college very nearly 20 years ago, and I've been close pals ever since. I was a full-time youth pastor for 10 years, and then our family moved here from Santa Cruz, which is a...
Nice move.
Yeah. To be part of the journey, which we are very pleased to have made that decision, to be here and enjoy being church and living life and doing all that with Adam and with you. So I'm super excited to be sharing this morning. It is going to be week 4 of our Journeying into the Wilderness series. Again, just one other little personal recap. So I'm going to sit down more often than not because my body's all messed up, and that way it increases the chances of me making it all the way through the whole service. So if I have to leave early, and then Gail takes over, and you just never know what is going to happen, how this is going to happen. So I'm going to do my best. Last week, I was not here actually, but I know we focused on wilderness sin, and Adam kind of closed things out with these points that writing down your prayers is a good thing. It helps you remember what you prayed, and you can in retrospect see, hey, God did answer that prayer, or God didn't do what I asked, and whew, am I ever glad. And also, I think for me, when I write down prayers, they tend to be less self-centered. Because it just seems awkward to see that written down in front of you, and God, I need this, and I want this, and I really like this, and I'm tired of this. Sometimes you end up praying for other people more when you write down your prayers, which is never a bad thing. Praying in a way that is full of trust and faith, and not mandating or dictating to God what He should be doing in your situation. Just because you go through a hard time doesn't mean that God has left you, and your leaders, we're going to talk a little more about our leaders later, but are just regular human people and also very flawed. One of my favorite things about Adam as a pastor is he's just a flawed guy and doesn't really pretend that that's not the case. So that's good. I've been around, worked with pastors. I worked with a pastor, my first church at Bible college, where I was on staff as a youth pastor. For him, they were very clearly defined. He was in pastor mode or he was not in pastor mode. Most of the time he was in pastor mode. That's why he wore wingtips and a tie when he mowed his lawn, in case someone from the church drove by at the end of the cul-de-sac where he lived that were to see him. He would want to make sure that they still held him in that same respect, which apparently was earned through neckwear. But we have a flawed leader, and acknowledge that, and I appreciate that. That guy was a really good guy. Really loved God, but I didn't really understand that part. The story we're going to be reading, the passage we're looking at, comes out of Exodus chapter 17, and it's the story of Moses. I'll just give you a little spoiler. Later in the story, Moses hits a rock with his stick and water comes out. There's another story in Numbers 20 where Moses hits a rock with his stick and water comes out, but in that one he wasn't supposed to. So in the one we're reading today, that's good. That was what God told him to do. In the one in Numbers 20, bad. God told him to talk to the rock, and he instead hit it because there was precedent for that, and then he gets in trouble. So I just want you to be waiting for, when's he going to get to the part where Moses gets in trouble and miss something really good, because that's not the story. And I think there might actually be something good at some point. So, give that to the forward. So, if you have a Bible that is paper or digital, feel free to turn to it. We're going to read Exodus chapter 17, verse 1. Adam usually uses the New King James Version of the Bible. I'm using the New Revised Standard Version. It's just a personal preference thing. At some other point, if you'd like to discuss Bible translations and theories of translation, I am happy to do that with you. But both the NKJV and the NRSV are similar and pretty valid and well recognized. The NRSV, preferred by 4 out of the 5 PhDs in our Bible college, Bible Biblical Studies department. So, I don't know, Adam doesn't respect those guys or what. And read the verse. From the wilderness of sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages as the Lord commanded. And the whole congregation of the Israelites, we could be talking about as many as 2 million people. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is not, a small crowd. This is a pretty good sized group. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? To kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And that's stone it in the bad way. Okay, thanks. Don't tell Adam I said that. You either can't run. The Lord said to Moses, he's not going to watch. The Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. I will be standing there in front of you at the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock and water will come out of it so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Last week, they were in the wilderness of sin. And this week, our story starts out by them leaving the wilderness of sin, which has to be a good thing. I do kind of wonder if there was like one guy that was just comfortable and happy in the wilderness of sin. You guys go on ahead, fine, I'm just going to stay here with my moonshine and internet porn. Stay in the wilderness of sin. And I don't know if that really happened or not, but I do kind of wonder if as they progressed, they had a place to go, but they had a safe place to be if there were people that didn't move on. It doesn't really say. So, verse 2 says, the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." So they leave the wilderness of sin, they get to the next campsite, and right away there's a problem. And understand, this wasn't like an hour, like a hike from the wilderness of sin to where they are now. This potentially could have been a couple of days that they ran out of water and didn't have water. So that's a legitimate concern at that point. But then they quarrel with Moses about it. The New King James Version says contended. A lot of versions use quarrel. A couple others use chided or argued with Moses about their not having something to drink. So the people, again, go to Moses with their complaints about the food and beverage situation. In the last chapter, they were upset about the food, and God sent manna and quail. In chapter 15, the chapter before, they had water, but it was nasty, and then God makes it taste all delicious. And when I was in Sunday school, it's like one of the only things I ever remember. But as a kid, Donna Schultz, my teacher, maybe like third grade Sunday school, she was teaching on that story, and the old kind of Kool-Aid that is the powder, but it's unsweetened, and she just made us some red Kool-Aid that looked all good, but was just flat nasty. And then she put the sugar in it, and it was delicious. Just this, and the red sugary drink, woohoo! And that's what I always think of when I hear that story. That God made it from the unsweetened, nasty Kool-Aid to the good stuff, which would really give a whole other meaning to drinking the Kool-Aid. So maybe we just should go. Okay. Thanks. So they're going places. They were on the move. They were moving toward the goal. They were out of Egypt, on their way to the Promised Land. And so their location had changed, but they still have the same problem. And I think we do this sometimes where we think that our problems are tied to our situation, our circumstances, and really there's something deeper and more personal going on. I kind of did this. I was working at that church with the guy that wore the tie and wingtips to mow his lawn. And there just were some things, again, we wouldn't do anything wrong. There were just some things where I felt like there were some ideological differences. Things weren't really working out. Youth group wasn't happening like I had hoped, and then I wasn't really given the space to try what I wanted to try. Again, not right or wrong, just it was time to go. And So I went to another church where I was given, first church felt like I never got to leave my office. The second church felt like I never got to go home. And there were some issues that followed me to that second place. And part of the reason was that they had nothing, some of my issues had nothing to do with the church or the pastor or the city or the budget or the board. They were with me. And there were some flaws and some problems, some things I needed to address about my own spiritual state before I could be leading others into this dynamic place that I wanted to be leading them. And so that's what I think Israel is doing, is that they've moved on, and it seems like they're dealing with the same issue about water and basic needs, but there's some other issues going on under the surface that I think really are what God is wanting to deal with them about, and not just about them being thirsty. In sports, right? In sports, we use this phrase a lot of times that player just needs a change of scenery. What? Oh, I know it makes no sense because he went from there to there. Ryan Ludwig, right? Household name? In your house? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset. I feel bad. The one time ever Ryan Ludwig makes it up on the screen.
I know.
Sorry. Sometimes you'll have an athlete who is kind of, they think, maybe underperforming in a certain situation, and that he just needs a change of scenery. If he can go to a new place, he'll fulfill all of his potential. And sometimes that totally happens. And it really was something about this situation that was hampering their ability to grow and develop. Like, say, they keep finding old guys and putting them in left field instead of the young guys who can actually hit. I'm going to talk about that later, not from up here, but let's talk later about why I'm very concerned that Brian Sabian felt it necessary to get Melvin Cabrera and Jose Padilla. One or the other. Sometimes, though, a player will change to a new team and nothing changes. They're still just not quite producing the way that everybody thought that they were going to. And it turns out it has nothing to do with the manager or the coaches or the ballpark or the mascot or the time zone. It's them. And there's something going on in them. Either they actually don't have as much talent as everyone thought, or just aren't ever able to really harness it. And you'll see players that will go, there's a situation, and finally he just needs a change of scenery, and they trade him to somewhere else, and he doesn't really work out there, and then they cut him, and then he signs with someone else, he signs with someone else, he signs with someone else. And the real problem never gets resolved because it's always a matter of, if I could just get into the right situation, just get the right hitting coach, or just get the right ballpark with just the right distance down the right field line. Sorry for going all big. I just didn't know any good football team. That it's not a situation with, it's not a, the problem isn't with their situation, it's with them. And we see when the Israelites get to where they're going, and they're concerned about not having water, that's a valid concern. Right? It's not like they're concerned because they only get 100 channels in this new place, or they're concerned because, I don't know, it smells funky or it's hotter than it is in the last place that they lived. Like, say they had moved from Santa Cruz to here. And just getting used to some of those things. So the problem wasn't that they were making up a crisis. They weren't imagining a problem. They needed water. That was legit. And they had kids and had animals that needed to have some water. But they did do something wrong. And the problem wasn't that they noticed or recognized that there was an issue. The problem was in the way that they responded to it. They didn't just acknowledge that there was a problem. They went and quarreled with Moses about it. They whined, they complained. There's no record of them trying to figure out a solution, holding a prayer meeting. I don't know if those things happen or not, but definitely no record of those things. They just go to the guy who's in charge and they yell at him. We don't have water, we're all going to die. And again, they bring back the same argument that already Moses has to be tired of. It was better in Egypt, back there where we were slaves. Way better. And I mean, I'm sure that in some ways there were some things about being in Egypt that were better, like they got some food so that they wouldn't starve to death so they could keep building pyramids and stuff. But far outweighed by the freedom and God leading them places, the situation that they were in right now. I had a kind of a rough patch a few years ago as I transitioned out of a full-time ministry position and just dealing with some. I went a little crazy, and really my perspective was off a little bit, and really had some mental health issues that are fairly well managed at this time. But there was a point where it seemed completely reasonable to me that prison seemed appealing. Because in prison, I wouldn't have to make any decisions for myself. That whole day would be planned out for me. So I wouldn't have to worry about having clothes or food. I wouldn't have to decide what to do about those things. And I was in such a weird place that made sense to me. That seemed like a reasonable thought process. What can I do to go there without hurting anyone? That kind of, and I mean, it was messed up. And I think that's kind of the same place that some of the Israelites are in this situation where their situation is dire and their thought process is flawed. And they're thinking it would be better to go back to Egypt where we were slaves because at least there we had drinking water. And Moses, they come to Moses, they bring this to Moses, and he goes to God and says, they're ready to stone me, they're ready to kill me. What am I going to do with them? And we're going to go on not really a tangent, but we're going to shoot down this way for a little bit, about spiritual leadership roles. And I think I'm in a good position to talk about this because I'm in a vague and undefined role. But I've been in a formal spiritual leadership role, and I've been really close to people who have been, especially head pastors in places. And that is a job that has a tremendous amount of upside and pleasure and enjoyment. And no matter how good the situation is, has frustrations and disappointments and things that are very difficult. I'm not saying this because I have a claim. I'm just saying in general, that's a tough job. When I was a youth pastor, sometimes I would have kids come up and tell me that they wanted to be a youth pastor when they grew up, which right there's a trouble. You can't grow up and be a youth pastor. I'm just kidding, you totally could. I knew one guy. And my youth pastor. He was from Nebraska though, so that was a lot. And I would have people tell me that, and my response to them was always the same, and that was, if God is telling you to be a youth pastor, then absolutely do it. Don't let anything stop you from doing it. Go to school, get training, help me, I'll walk with you, we'll do the process together, and we'll put you in a situation where you have the tools to go to do what God has called you to do. But if you just think that sounds like a cool job, because not a lot of jobs involve that many Hostess products, or other weird things that come with being a youth pastor, run away. It is a fun job, but if that's not what you're supposed to be doing, run away. Because it takes all of you. Being in a spiritual leadership position requires it. It's different than any other kind of job, I think, because you can never not think about it. You can never just leave it all at the office. You can never not be in that role. You're available to people all the time, and you're seeing people at their best, and you're seeing people at their worst, and you're intervening in situations, and you're helping people in times of crisis. And there are tremendous blessings that come with being able to be in those situations with people. And it is tremendously challenging and difficult and daunting. I worked on church staffs for 10 years, right, with senior pastors long enough to know that I never wanted to be one, because everything is your responsibility. Music's too loud, building's too hot, building's too cold, church is not growing, church is growing too fast. Youth pastor said something offensive. That happened quite a few times in Christian life. There's a problem with the lease on the copy machine. Everything is your responsibility when you're a senior pastor. And you can have people that are supposed to be dealing with that, but if they don't do it right, or somebody thinks they didn't do it right, or they don't know what to do, it ultimately becomes your responsibility. And that's a tough situation. One church where I was working at, we had this nice piece of property, and at the back kind of dropped off a little hill to really what was a drainage ditch. But this is in Sebastopol, which is a very environmentally friendly kind of town. So there were some neighbors on the other side of the drainage ditch who were very concerned that part of our hill was eroding down into the drainage ditch, and because they thought it was some sort of really important natural refuge kind of creek. And they were, even though it kept going under the ground in big pipes, up there and over there, but right there. And she was gonna, and there was environmental, and there were phone calls, and there was threats, and there was anger, and our senior pastor is having to figure out about riprap and erosion control and spreading this, and if we plant this, and if we do this, and we apologize to that person, and they don't cover any of that in Bible college. Not one little part of it. Riprap never came up one time in any of the classes. And I went to my classes most of the time. And that never came up even once. Unless maybe it was that one class where I sat next to Adam. Sometimes we had our own conversation. That makes it right. It was about basic. There are times that leaders need to be called on things, or evaluated, or corrected, or challenged. 100%, that's very true. But sometimes we have people in churches, and I'm talking about the church, or churches. I promise I'm not thinking of anyone in particular. I'll even close my eyes from it. When we're in a church where there are people who would rather criticize and be negative and find fault with their leadership than be supportive, that's a problem, and that church isn't going to grow and begin to do the way that God wants it to do. It's not to say that we pretend like our leaders are flawless, because we don't do that. And that's not helping anyone. But if our preference is to criticize and tear down, that's a problem. If that's where our focus is, that's a problem. And our church isn't going to be what it can or should be. And honestly, the same thing is true for leaders who we don't think of being spiritual leaders. The Bible says that leaders are appointed by God. And just like noticing that the Israelites, that they needed water, it's not a sin to notice, like, hey, there are some things wrong in our culture and country. That's okay. But the way we respond to that matters. And what we can't do is spend our time and energy criticizing when we're not contributing anything to the solution. That's not a pro-President Obama statement. That's just in the Bible. All right, but we are to pray for our leaders no matter who they are, how they got there. There's no clause in the Bible that says you don't have to pray for them if you didn't vote for them. It's not in there. I'm pretty sure. Feel free to find it, but I'm pretty sure it's not in there. But I definitely paid attention in that class. Doesn't mean you need to vote for the incumbent every time because God put them in that situation, so I must. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have a responsibility to respond to our leaders in the way that God asks us to. And when we can genuinely be praying for someone, lifting them up, praying for their personal needs, for their leadership ability, for their wisdom, our attitude toward them is going to change. Again, it doesn't mean you vote for them again, necessarily, but your attitude is going to be different towards someone that you're praying for. And you become someone who cares about them. And you want to see them thrive and prosper and be effective. Which doesn't mean you agree with all of their policies and ideology. Does that make sense? It's okay to not say that he does everything right. We're not saying that's what you have to do, but we have a responsibility to pray for and support leadership. God says to Moses, take your staff, take some people, go up to the rock, hit it, and water's going to come out, and people are going to drink, and it's going to be delightful. And that's what Moses does. He takes his staff, he takes the elders, goes up to the rock where God tells him, he hits the rock, and stuff comes out. And here's what's interesting to me about that God's solution wasn't one that required total passivity on the part of them. They had to do something to be a part of God's solution. They didn't just wait and God fixed it for them. There are so many stories in the Bible and just in life around us where we're required to take some kind of step of faith, some kind of action to be a part of God's process of solving whatever our wilderness kind of situation is. Most of the time, we have to do something. And it's not always even a big part of the solution, but it's a step toward God saying, I trust you, I trust your solution, and I'm going to do what you say. God could have made it just solve the problem like he did with the food problem. God sent them manna and quail. He could have just sent water. Could have just rained in big buckets or 30% recycled plastic containers. Could have sent that down. They could have woken up every morning to large bottles of Aquafina, and everyone would have been happy. But that's not what God did in that situation. I don't really understand sometimes why God doesn't do more things on his own. I don't always understand why he chooses to involve us in the process. Because we mess it up. I don't understand why God would put someone in my life that desperately needs to have a relationship with him and connect with him and have this dynamic encounter with him and then trust me to be part of it. Because I'm going to screw it up. God, you just do that on your own. Just show up in his bedroom in the middle of the night, just in this massive, divine encounter, and that's what he'll need. If I have to talk to him, it's probably not going to work out the right way. You're so much better at it than me, God. Kind of like I got out of being the ice cream scooper in our house because I'm not good at it. My wife's out there with the kids. And I had to sacrifice quite a bit of ice cream to convince her that I wasn't good at it. Oh, on the floor. To where now, if there's ice cream in the house, nobody's looking at me, dude's scooping. Right? Because I am not good at it. And I think I try to pull that same thing on God sometimes. God, if you want that person to know about you, you're so much better at that than I am. You should totally just do that yourself. And I don't understand always why God involves us in those kinds of processes, but he does. And my response to that needs to be one of awe and humility. Okay, I don't know why you want to use me, but thanks. And I'm going to do my best. And you're going to go do it with me, right? And of course you would. But often, the solution to our crisis or the solution to someone else's crisis involves us taking some step in that direction. Moses takes the elders and he takes the staff. And the staff of Moses has got to be like one of the most wonderful, amazing, the next, when they make Indiana Jones 7, I think it's going to be about finding Moses' staff, because this thing had some power. It's right up there with the Sphere of Longinus and the Cosmic Cube and stuff like that. This is big time. The Green Lantern ring, it doesn't work. So they go, and he takes the stick, and he hits the rock, and water comes out, and the day is saved. Hooray! And sometimes we read stories like this in the Bible, and I kind of get this snooty attitude toward them. Those guys are such idiots. The stuff that had just happened, it wasn't like generations earlier. It was them that saw plagues in Egypt, and the Red Sea part, and crossing the Nile River, and doing all these, and provision, and God's feet as pillars of cloud and fire in the desert to lead them, and water and quail and bread showing up on the ground, and then, they're worried because they don't have water, and it's so easy for me to think, those guys were so dumb. How could it had just happened? And now they did that, which was so much harder for God. So much harder. That's one of my problems. Sometimes I try to give God the really easy solution. Look, God, if you would just do this, and you're hardly going to even notice doing that. That's nothing. Just make these particular ping pong balls bounce in this particular order on that particular date that match the numbers on this piece of paper, and we're all going to be good. How hard is that for God? Ping pong balls. I'm not. That's a one-time. You need to then just go on and help some other people. Sometimes, and it would seem like after they had seen God do these amazing things consistently, each crisis had been met with some kind of miraculous supernatural provision, and yet they're complaining and they're nervous that they don't have any water. And then I realized that I do the same thing. God has provided for me through my life in such amazing ways and so consistently. When we just had no money and we had enough food, or we had no money and food showed up in the passenger seat of my car, which is another good reason to leave the top down. Makes it easier for angels to drop off bags of groceries. Convertible owner in the back. It's all right. It's got the clip-on hardtop. That makes it okay. No, it's cool. We kid. Right, but I tell you, and God has provided, and there's been healing and health and family and relationships, and God has been so faithful and shown up every time. Not always the solution that I thought was going to be the best one, but it was the best one. Every time. And then something happens, and I freak out. And I get nervous, and there's hand-wringing, and I call my grandma, and I cry, and she prays for me and reassures me that it's going to be okay. And I like to call grandmas to pray because grandmas have the red phone hotline to God. And she'll call her other little grandma friends, and then heavens will open, and amazing miracles will take place because holy cow. She's in her room at the assisted living place. Not a lot of other stuff going on. If I need her to pray about something, that's happening right now. If I had a pen, I would make a note that I should probably call her. Just to say thanks. Write it down. Can you write it on one of my kids' hands for it? That way I'll see it later. But it doesn't mean that every situation gets resolved the way that we want it to. People lose jobs. People die. Families blow up. When those things happen, it doesn't mean that God's not there. Sometimes all we can do is we put ourselves into a situation where we take a step in the direction we feel like God wants us to go as an act of obedience and humility and just acknowledging that we trust Him more than we trust ourselves. And sometimes all we can do is take that step and ask this question that Moses asked at the end of verse 7. Is the Lord among us or not? If we don't really think so, then you're probably wasting your time being here on a Sunday experience when you could be watching the Pro Bowl pregame show, which is, I'm sure, awesome. If you don't really think that He's with us, if He's not among us, if He's not at work, if He's not with you, if He's not with me, then you probably have some real questions to ask yourself and some real things you need to address. But if we do believe that, if we really believe that He's among us and at work in us and around us, then we need to live lives that look like we believe that. There needs to be something different about people who truly believe that God is among us. God is who he says he is, or he's nothing. He's a sham, an imaginary friend. If Jesus isn't the Son of God, he wasn't a good teacher. He was a horrible, horrible person. Because millions of people have been deceived by him and lost their lives and gone to their graves believing in what he said. And if he's not who he said he was one of the worst people to ever live. He's not a good teacher if his whole teaching is just to intentionally steer people in the wrong direction. Well, I know I have seen God come through for me, and we as a church have seen God come through for us. And we believe that he is alive and in us and among us, and we are to live like that's true. Going forward, just a couple things. This is the last slide, so we need a little winding down. It's my last page of notes here. No matter what our circumstances are, the way in which we respond to them matters. Our attitude matters. Our response to God on an emotional and obedience level is really important. God doesn't need us to trust him so that he feels better about himself. God needs us to trust him so that we can see that he's the one in charge and that he is better and smarter and understands the big picture better than we ever can. My solutions are always about this little thing that's going on right now. And God's are about my life and the lives of people around me and legacy and generations and the things that are. So even though something might not seem like the right solution to this little thing going on in my life today, it doesn't mean it's not the right solution. And when we respond to God with that kind of an attitude, it changes things about our circumstances by changing the way that we deal with them. Circumstances can even stay the same or even get worse, and the situation is better because we're responding the right way. Not to say that we will always like it. I don't always like it. I haven't liked the times where we've been in just stark financial crisis, or health has declined radically and quickly, or those kinds of things. But man, I trust God because he hasn't let me down. And there are times I can go back and think that if he had done what I had asked him to do, things would have been so much worse. So much worse. We have a responsibility to pray for our leaders. Spiritual leaders that we don't think of being spiritual. Bosses. We have a responsibility to pray for them because prayer makes a difference and because it changes our attitude toward them. And lastly, are we living lives that look like we are people who really believe that God is among us? I would really encourage you to take some time today, this week, to think about what it looks like when someone lives that kind of life. What does it look like when someone lives out that they really believe that God is among us? How does that compare to the way that you're living your life? And you understand there's got to be some kind of continuum. It's not, I'm totally nailing it, or I am failing. Most of us are probably somewhere in the middle. But I think just thinking through what that would look like, both from your perspective about yourself and from other people's perspective looking at you. Are we living lives that look like we believe God is among us? And how can people tell? And how can you tell? And what is your thought process like in crisis? And what are you going to do in times of crisis? And what role does God play in how you respond to difficult times? And then let's be thinking about how can we be encouraging each other to live like that. Part of being part of a church has to be giving some other people permission to be honest with us. If there's not some kind of accountability or encouragement or mentoring or leadership, if that's not happening at all, we're really missing out on a big part of what church can and should be. There has to be people in our lives who can say, man, the way you're responding to this probably isn't what God has in mind, or probably could be better, or could be more positive, or could be more faith-filled. You understand the difference between positive and happy? And if we really live our lives like that, or we really believe that God is among us, what kind of impact does that have on our own souls and on the world around us? And I think it's a big one. Is the Lord among us or not? God, I want to be someone who lives that out. I want to be someone who people can look at my life and think, that guy, at least he's sincere in his belief. He's consistent in what he believes. The way he lives matches what he says. I fail at that often, God, but I want to be that. And I desperately need you to be among us and in me more than ever, so that I can continue to grow and get better at that, and help people around me and teach my kids how to live lives where that's true. Not just that look like we believe you're among us, but lives where we really believe that you're among us. And God, as a church, help us to live like that. About our church's finances and purpose and position in our community and the world. There are lots of other churches that love you and want to do what's right. Help us to be one of those places. Not more than somebody else, but help us to be a church where it's obvious that you are among us and at work. I'm so thankful, God, that you value the process, you value our journey in the wilderness and out of it. That you are with us now, not just waiting for us at the end. Help us to respond to situations with the right attitude. Help us to lift up our leaders in the ways that you have asked us to. And help us to live lives that show ourselves and the world around us that we believe you are among us. Thank you so much for your word and for this account of this encounter that Moses and the people had with you. Thank you, you provided and you met their need. And help us to trust that you will do that for us also. Thank you for being with us in this place today. God bless our pastor and his wife on their quick time away and this trip home. Keep them safe. Thanks for just the exceptional leader that Adam is. The gifts and the calling you have put on his life. Thanks that he has responded so favorably and has been obedient to what you have asked him, even though it's been difficult and dark. Thanks for being in this place today. I would love you. In Jesus' name. Cool. Thanks. All right. Hey guys, you are free to whatever, mingle, leave,
Cupcakes.
schmooze, enjoy a cupcake.